"Stop. Do not take off. She is going to crash the plane." The sentence cut through the morning like a siren. Sunlight glittered off the private jet parked on the tarmac, engines idling with a low, steady vibration. Crew members moved with practiced calm. A warm breeze carried the faint scent of jet fuel and the distant hum of traffic. For a heartbeat, everything felt ordinary, and then a small figure stood in the center of the runway and changed the shape of the day. She was a little girl in a navy dress, her braids neat and uncompromised by the humidity. Her hands were small and steady around a glowing phone. Her voice was high but certain, and the command she had issued hung in the air like a warning bell. People turned. A guard reached for his radio. The pilot on the stairs stopped mid-step, the pilot uniform suddenly heavy on her shoulders. The man in the tailored suit moved forward faster than he intended. He was the chief executive officer, a man used to decisions that bent markets and moved people. His briefcase lay forgotten on the asphalt. "What are you doing out there?" he asked, his tone more sharp with disbelief than with anger. He expected a prank, a mistaken child, a misunderstanding. He did not expect a phone held up like a small beacon. The girl lifted the screen so that it caught the sunlight. On that bright rectangle, the motion of the night before replayed in grainy color. A figure in a pilot uniform bent at the wing, a hand steady as it tipped a small silver flask. The camera shook. The liquid glinted as it poured into the fuel filler, a dark thread disappearing into the tank. The image flickered and then held in a loop. A murmur traveled through the gathered staff. The chief executive officer felt a coldness that had nothing to do with air conditioning. Behind him, his assistant whispered that they should call security, that a child could not possibly be telling the truth about this. The pilot who matched the uniform on the screen smiled with the kind of calm that was practiced for press appearances. "Children make up stories," she said, voice light enough to be dangerous. The girl did not look away. "Then why did she say my father would not speak again?" she asked. The question simple and small and heavier than anyone expected. "My father worked here before she did." The phone trembled a little in her palm, but the video on the screen did not. The image of the flask, the hand, the fuel cap open like an invitation refused to lie. The chief executive officer crouched down to be on her level. He wanted to see the face of the person who had filmed this. He wanted to find proof that the footage was fake. Instead, he saw in her eyes the kind of clarity that comes from watching something wrong over and over until the truth becomes a fact in the bones. Around them, the runway seemed to inhale. A mechanic closed a toolbox. A baggage handler paused mid-lift. The engines were cut to idle, then to silence. In the hush, the phone light looked like a small altar. The powerful man understood, in a way that felt like a physical weight lifting and falling at once, that a child had just put a name to a risk he had not known he was carrying. He straightened slowly, and for the first time that morning, the direction of his movement was not away from responsibility but toward it. The echo of the little girl's warning still lingered across the runway. The engines of the private jet were now silent, leaving only the restless wind and the sound of footsteps on the asphalt. The man in the navy suit, the chief executive officer named Nathan Cole, stood frozen for several seconds before he finally spoke. His voice was low, almost too calm, as if he was trying to convince himself that order still existed. "Everyone stand down, turn off the power completely," he said. The flight crew exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. The pilot in question, Captain Reyes, remained at the base of the stairs. Her posture was confident, but her eyes flicked briefly toward the girl holding the phone. It was a small movement, quick and practiced, yet Nathan caught it. He had spent decades reading micro-expressions in negotiation rooms. This one looked like guilt covered in charm. The security guard brought the little girl closer, holding her arm gently but firmly. Nathan knelt again, the same way he had minutes earlier, and looked at her. The bright sunlight hit the phone's cracked screen. "What is your name?" he asked. "Amira," she said softly. "Amira, where did you get that video?" She hesitated, glancing at the uniformed woman behind him. Her lower lip quivered, but her gaze stayed locked on his. "My father filmed it before he died," she said. "He worked here. He said someone was changing the fuel line. He said if anything ever happened, I should show it to you." Nathan's heart gave one hard thump against his ribs. He looked at the girl closely. The name was familiar. Her last name, she said, was Benson. That name was on a safety report from 6 months ago. A mechanic who had died in what was ruled a maintenance accident. "Sir," Captain Reyes said behind him, "this child must be mistaken. Benson was dismissed for negligence long before his accident. I can explain everything, but we are on a tight schedule." Her tone was smooth, polite, professional, perfectly tuned to sound reasonable. But something about it grated against the silence. Nathan rose to his full height. "No one leaves until we confirm the condition of that aircraft," he said. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crew. The maintenance chief stepped forward, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Cole, the pre-flight inspection was completed by protocol. There was nothing abnormal." "Check again," Nathan replied. "Now." The man hesitated, then gestured for his team to open the side panel near the wing. Tools clinked. The smell of fuel hung heavy in the air. Nathan turned back to the child. Her face was solemn, as if she understood far more than a child should. He lowered his voice. "Why did you come here today, Amira?" "Because she was going to fly that plane," the girl answered, nodding toward the captain. "And she said it was finally going to be over." Nathan's chest tightened. "She said that to you?" "Yes. She did not know I was listening." Before he could respond, a shout came from the inspection team. "Sir, there is residue on the auxiliary line. The seal looks tampered." The captain's posture faltered for the first time. Her lips parted slightly, and then she spoke quickly. "That could be from cleaning solvent. It is standard in post-maintenance." Nathan's gaze hardened. "You told me this plane was refueled at dawn. Why would there still be solvent at the line?" No one answered. The silence thickened. He motioned for the security officer. "Escort Captain Reyes to the control office. Do not let her leave the terminal." The captain laughed softly, a sound meant to ease tension. "You cannot be serious, Nathan. I have flown your company jets for 3 years. Then you know I do not gamble with lives," he said. Her face shifted, the smile gone. She handed over her credentials with a stiff motion and turned away. The guards followed her inside. For a long moment, Nathan did not move. The girl stood beside him, her phone still open, the paused image reflecting in her eyes. "You believed me," she said. He exhaled slowly. "I had to." The mechanic sealed the line and began collecting samples. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of sirens from the main gate. Airport security had been called, though no one had said the word aloud. Nathan turned toward Amira again. "You said your father worked here. Do you know why he was recording that night?" She nodded once. "He said he found something wrong with the plane. He wanted to tell you, but then the next day they said he fell from the scaffolding." Her small voice tightened at the edges. "He would not have fallen. He was careful." Nathan's throat felt dry. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun had risen higher, lighting the sleek curve of the silent jet. The weight of what he might have ignored began to settle on him. Behind them, the inspection chief approached, holding a clear sample vial. The liquid inside shimmered pale yellow under the light. "It is not standard fuel," he said. "There is a chemical additive that does not belong here." Nathan stared at it. "Can it cause failure?" "Yes, sir. Catastrophic failure, depending on temperature." The words landed like a verdict. The girl whispered. She wanted it to look like an accident, just like before. Nathan did not ask what she meant. He already knew. The truth was beginning to unfold like a slow, painful dawn. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, the gesture both protective and grateful. "You did the right thing, Amira. You stopped it." She looked up at him. "My father said good people are sometimes late, but they still arrive." Nathan almost smiled, but it came out as a breath. Around them, the crew continued their inspection. The sound of tools against metal filled the quiet. In the distance, the jet gleamed, still grounded, as if waiting for absolution. Nathan stood beside the girl, understanding that the danger had only just begun to reveal itself. The afternoon light shifted across the hangar as investigators arrived, their reflective jackets catching the glare of the Sunday. The once calm private terminal had turned into a place of whispers and watchful eyes. Nathan Cole stood near the edge of the tarmac, his arms crossed tightly as he watched the technicians secure the jet. Amira sat on a nearby bench, her legs barely reaching the ground, her small hands holding her phone as if it were something alive. The wind carried the faint, metallic scent of aviation fuel, mixed with the salt of the nearby ocean. The silence between them was long, yet not empty. Nathan finally spoke, his voice lower than before, filled with a tone that mixed disbelief and guilt. "Your father's name was David Benson," he said quietly. "I remember him now. He worked maintenance on the earlier models of this fleet." Amira nodded. Her eyes stayed on the phone. "He liked fixing things," she said. "He said machines are honest. They only break when someone hurts them." Nathan's throat tightened. The words hit deeper than he expected. He crouched to her level again. "Amira, I am sorry for what happened to him. I should have looked closer when the report came in." She looked up, her voice steady. "You could not. They did not let you." Before he could answer, one of the inspectors approached carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Cole," the man said, "we finished the first analysis. The substance in the fuel is a glycol-based chemical that reacts under heat. It would have caused a total engine shutdown within minutes of takeoff." Nathan straightened. "Was it intentional?" The inspector hesitated, then nodded once. "There is no doubt. Someone tampered with it deliberately." Behind them, the murmur of voices rose near the hangar. Captain Reyes was being escorted out by airport security, her expression composed but her steps quick. She glanced briefly toward Nathan and the child, her lips pressed together in a faint smirk that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. Nathan watched her go, a knot forming in his chest. "Keep her in custody," he said to the guard. "I want every communication log reviewed, every refueling report from the last month." The guard nodded and followed the captain inside. When Nathan turned back, Amira was scrolling through her phone. "There is more," she said suddenly. "He recorded 2 videos, not 1. She tapped the screen and a second clip began to play. The image was darker, the camera shaking as if filmed from behind a stack of crates. The same hangar appeared, but this time 2 figures stood in the distance. One was Captain Reyes. The other was a man in a dark suit with a corporate badge clipped to his lapel. Nathan leaned closer. The voice on the recording was faint but recognizable. "After this flight, it is finished," the man said. "He cannot trace it back to us." Amira's small finger paused the video. "That is the one who came to our house," she said. "He gave my father an envelope before he died." "Oh." Nathan's jaw tightened. He recognized the voice. It belonged to a senior executive from the board, a man named Victor Hale, someone Nathan had trusted for over a decade. He stood completely still for several seconds, the sound of the nearby engines and tools fading into the background. "Amira," he said softly, "this video could change everything." She looked at him with that same unwavering calm. "That is why my father told me to keep it safe." Nathan exhaled slowly, then placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did something very brave today. You saved lives, and you may have saved the truth, too." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I just did what he told me to do." From the terminal, another guard approached. "Sir, Captain Reyes is refusing to speak without legal counsel, but she said something strange." "What did she say?" Nathan asked. The guard hesitated. She said, "You should have checked the first crash before blaming this one." Then she smiled. Nathan exchanged a glance with the inspector. "The first crash? You mean the one in Miami last year?" The inspector nodded slowly. "Same aircraft model, same maintenance division." A cold realization began to bloom in Nathan's mind. He turned back toward the jet, the silver body reflecting the fading Sunday. Every connection he had built, every report he had signed, began to feel like threads of a web that had been spun around him without his noticing. Amira's voice broke through the storm in his thoughts. "Mr. Cole, do you believe me now?" He looked at her, seeing not just a child but a witness to something far bigger than either of them. "Yes, Amira," he said. "I believe you completely." She nodded, her expression calm but tired. "My father said truth makes people lonely before it makes them safe." Nathan felt that line settle into him like a stone in deep water. "He was right," he said quietly. "But he would be proud of you." The investigators packed their equipment, sealing evidence bags and labeling samples. The sun dipped lower, painting the tarmac gold. Nathan watched as Amira tucked her phone carefully into the small pocket of her dress. When the first police vehicle arrived, flashing red and blue across the polished steel of the jet, Nathan turned toward the lead investigator. "We are not stopping here," he said. "I want full transparency. Every report, every file, every name that connects to this company's aircraft safety records." The investigator nodded. Understood, Mr. Cole. Amira stood beside him, her braids moving slightly in the breeze. For a moment, she looked both very young and strangely timeless, like someone carrying a secret that the world was not ready to face. Nathan looked at her, and then back at the jet, still grounded but now silent in a different way, like a witness waiting to testify. The air was thick with the scent of fuel and truth, both equally volatile. As the sirens faded into the distance, Nathan realized this was no longer about one flight or one act of sabotage. It was about uncovering what had been buried, about giving justice to a man who had died trying to do the right thing, and about the child who had refused to stay silent. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. Amira looked up at them quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. My father said stars are just promises that keep burning. Nathan followed her gaze. Then tonight, he said, we will make sure one of them is his. Night settled over the private airfield, quiet and uneasy. The runway lights stretched in long amber lines across the darkness, guiding no planes, only the slow movement of investigators and security staff. Inside the terminal, Nathan Cole sat in a glass-walled conference room, the glow from his tablet reflecting in his tired eyes. Across from him sat Amira Benson, her small frame wrapped in a gray airport blanket. The phone that had changed everything rested on the table between them like a fragile piece of evidence and faith combined. A police officer stood near the door, keeping a respectful distance. The investigators had paused for the night, but Nathan could not stop thinking. His mind replayed the last few hours like a reel that refused to end the contaminated fuel. The captain's smirk, the second video, and the name Victor Hale echoing in his thoughts. Amira broke the silence first. Are they going to jail? She asked. Her voice was soft but carried a strength that surprised him. He looked up from his tablet and met her eyes. If the law does its job, yes. But sometimes justice takes time. She nodded, her expression unreadable. That is what my father said. He said the truth moves slow, but it always finds the light. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was, she replied. He told me to keep my eyes open and never walk away if something feels wrong, even if people do not listen. Nathan studied her for a long moment. That is exactly what you did today. She looked down at her hands. He would have done the same. Outside the glass, the security team rolled the jet into the maintenance hangar for safekeeping. The distant echo of metal on metal carried through the night. Nathan watched for a while before speaking again. Do you still live near here? Amira hesitated. Not really. We moved after my father died. My mother has been sick. We stay with my aunt now. She works nights. Does she know you are here? I called her, Amira said. She said she is coming soon. She was crying. I think she was scared that I came alone. Nathan exhaled and nodded. She must care about you very much. Amira smiled faintly. She says I remind her of him, always running toward trouble instead of away from it. For the first time that evening, Nathan allowed himself a small laugh. Sometimes running toward trouble is the only way to stop it. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. The door opened, and the lead investigator entered holding a printed report. Mr. Cole, he said, we finished reviewing the maintenance logs. You were right. The last 3 service reports were falsified. Every one of them was signed off by Victor Hale. Nathan's expression hardened. Was Captain Reyes working under his supervision? Yes, the investigator said. Her account was being funded by an offshore subsidiary. It looks like a larger operation, possibly insurance fraud or corporate sabotage. Amira's brow furrowed. What does that mean? Nathan turned to her gently. It means some people were pretending to do their jobs, but they were hurting others to make money. Your father found out, and they tried to silence him. Amira's fingers tightened around the blanket. So they killed him. Nathan paused before answering. They caused his death, yes. His voice softened. But you made sure they will not hurt anyone else. The girl looked down, her eyes glistening but calm. He said one day I would have to be brave. I did not know it would be today. The investigator placed the documents on the table. We have enough to involve federal authorities. The case will expand by morning. Good, Nathan said quietly. It should. As the officer left, The room grew quiet again. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Amira yawned, her exhaustion finally showing. Nathan noticed and stood. You should rest. There is a small lounge across the hall. I will make sure you are safe until your aunt arrives. She shook her head slightly. Can I stay here? The lights outside make me feel better. He smiled. All right, you can stay here. I will not leave either. He turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow from the runway beyond the glass. The air felt still, the kind of stillness that comes after chaos when truth begins to settle. Nathan looked at the phone again. You know, Amira, he said quietly, your father might have saved lives twice, once when he filmed this, and again through you. She met his gaze. Do you think he knows? Nathan looked out the window, where the stars hung low over the horizon. If there is a place where good people see what happens after they are gone, then yes, I believe he does. A moment passed, and Amira finally let her head rest on her folded arms. Her breathing slowed. Nathan sat back down, still watching the silent airfield. The reflection of the jet shimmered on the glass wall, grounded but waiting. He reached for his phone and began typing an email. Every word was deliberate. He was sending copies of the evidence to 3 independent legal firms and 2 journalists. If there was one thing this night had taught him, it was that silence protects the wrong people. When he finished, he glanced again at the sleeping child. Her small face was peaceful now, her phone resting beside her like a guardian. Nathan realized how much he owed her, not only for saving his company from disaster, but for reminding him that courage does not require power, only conviction. Outside, a new light began to appear in the distance, headlights approaching along the service road. Her aunt had arrived. Nathan stood and walked toward the door. The air smelled faintly of rain now, the promise of a storm lingering on the horizon. He paused before stepping out, looking once more at the girl asleep in the chair. The words she had repeated from her father echoed softly in his mind. The truth moves slow, but it always finds the light. Tonight, he believed it, and the first light had come from a child who refused to be quiet. The next morning arrived gray and cool. A fine mist hung over the airfield, softening the edges of the runway lights and the buildings beyond. Nathan Cole stood by the terminal window, watching the horizon where the first traces of sunlight pushed through the fog. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind: Amira's cry, the poisoned fuel, the videos, the confession that had shattered everything he thought he knew about his company. Behind him, the sound of quiet footsteps drew his attention. Amira's aunt, a woman in her 40s named Lorraine, entered the room carrying a worn handbag. Her face looked tired but kind. She had arrived late in the night after a long drive from the next city. Amira followed close behind her, her hair slightly messy, her expression solemn but calmer than before. Mr. Cole, Lorraine began, her tone respectful but cautious. Thank you for keeping her safe. She told me everything. Nathan turned from the window. I should be the one thanking her, he said. Your niece saved dozens of lives. She also exposed something I should have seen long ago. Lorraine placed a hand gently on Amira's shoulder. She gets that from her father. He always said doing the right thing is never easy, but it is always right. Amira looked up at Nathan. Did they catch the woman? He nodded. Captain Reyes is in custody. She will be questioned today by federal agents. There will be trials, investigations, and consequences. But the real work is just beginning. Amira tilted her head. What kind of work? The kind that fixes what was broken, Nathan said. I let too many people make decisions in my name without truly seeing what they were doing. That ends now. Lorraine looked relieved but still uncertain. Will Amira need to talk to them again? The investigators? Yes, Nathan answered. But she will not be alone. I will make sure she has legal protection and counseling. No one should ever face what she did without help. Amira nodded quietly. Her eyes drifted toward the large window, where the silver jet sat grounded, still under heavy guard. She spoke softly. It looks different now, like it knows it almost did something terrible. Nathan followed her gaze. Machines reflect the people who use them. They do not choose right or wrong, we do. The girl's small fingers traced a circle on the glass. My father used to say that too. A silence settled over the room, gentle but heavy with shared understanding. Nathan cleared his throat. Lorraine, I know this might sound unusual, but I would like to offer both of you somewhere safe to stay for a few days. There will be reporters here, and I do not want Amira caught in the chaos. I can arrange a private house with security until things calm down." Lorraine hesitated. "You have already done so much." "This is not charity," Nathan said firmly. "It is gratitude. I owe your family the truth and safety that my company failed to give." After a moment she nodded. "All right, thank you." Amira smiled faintly. "Will you come too?" Nathan returned her smile. "Yes, I have work to do, but I will not be far." By noon, they were on the road. The car moved slowly along the highway, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Amira sat in the back seat, her eyes watching the passing landscape rows of warehouses, billboards, and then open fields. Lorraine sat beside her, occasionally brushing her hair back from her face. Nathan rode in the front, silent for much of the drive, his mind filled with plans. When they arrived, the house was quiet and surrounded by tall oak trees. It was one of Nathan's company lodges, usually reserved for executives during retreats. Now it felt different, less like luxury, more like a place for healing. Amira stepped out of the car and looked around. The air smelled of rain and pine. "It is pretty," she said softly. Nathan smiled. "It is peaceful. You both deserve that." Inside, the fireplace was already lit. Lorraine began unpacking a few clothes while Amira explored the small library near the living room. On one of the shelves, she found an old model airplane covered in dust. She picked it up carefully, running her finger along the wing. Nathan noticed her curiosity. "That was mine," he said. "I built it when I was your age. I wanted to be a pilot before I became what I am now." "Why did you stop?" Amira asked. "I thought building things was more important than flying them," he answered with a faint smile. "But maybe I forgot that flying is what makes people dream." Amira looked at the little model and then at him. "Maybe you can build again. My father said when people forget what they love, they stop being kind." Nathan felt a quiet ache in his chest. Your father was a wise man. The afternoon passed slowly. Lorraine rested upstairs while Amira sat near the window, sketching the jet she had seen. Her lines were simple but clear: the grounded plane, the child, the man standing beside her. When Nathan saw it, he felt something stir in him that he had not felt in years: purpose. As evening came, they shared a small meal by the fire. Amira ate quietly, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. Nathan watched the flames and spoke softly. "Tomorrow, there will be meetings, press conferences, and questions. I will not let them twist the story. People will know what happened, and your father's name will be cleared." Amira nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "He will be happy." Nathan looked at her across the flickering light. "He would be proud, Amira, of you and of what you stood for." She smiled sleepily. "Thank you for believing me. I should have believed sooner," he said. "But I promise I will not forget again." As she drifted into sleep, Lorraine covered her with a blanket. Nathan remained by the fire, the sound of the wind moving through the trees outside. The storm had passed, but its lesson lingered. For the first time in many years, he felt like a man beginning again, not a powerful executive guarding his empire, but a human being rediscovering what honesty costs and what it can save. And in the stillness of that quiet house, the faint hum of justice began to rise like the whisper of an engine ready to start anew. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows of the lodge, filling the living room with a pale golden glow. The smell of brewed coffee and toasted bread drifted through the air. Nathan Cole sat at the long wooden table with a laptop open in front of him. Reports, emails, and legal notices filled the screen, but his attention was elsewhere. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward the corner where Amira sat drawing quietly with a box of colored pencils. She had slept through the night without fear. Her aunt, Lorraine, had left early to call their family doctor and check on Amira's mother. The calm of the house felt fragile, like the world was holding its breath after a storm. Nathan closed the laptop. "What are you drawing this time?" he asked. Amira turned the paper around. On it was a picture of the sky above a field. A small airplane, painted silver and blue, rose toward a sun that she had drawn with 12 bright rays. "It is flying now," she said. "Not the bad one. This one is good." Nathan smiled. "I like that." "What made you draw it?" She shrugged lightly. Because I had a dream. My father was fixing the wings again. He said they were ready. He nodded slowly. Maybe that means something is starting to heal. Before he could say more, the sound of a car approached on the gravel path outside. Tires crunched, then stopped. Nathan walked to the window. A black sedan had pulled up near the gate, and two men in dark suits stepped out. They were federal investigators from the Aviation Bureau, arriving earlier than expected. He opened the door before they could knock. "You are here sooner than I thought," he said. One of them, Agent Reynolds, held up his badge. "We wanted to speak before the press conference begins this afternoon. There are developments you should know about." Nathan led them inside. Amira watched from her chair, quiet but alert, as the men set their briefcases on the table. The air felt different now, serious, heavy. Reynolds opened a folder. "Captain Reyes has confessed partially," he said. "She claims she was following orders from higher up, but she will not name who gave them. However, we have traced the financial trail connected to Victor Hale. It links directly to two shell companies that benefited from insurance payouts related to previous aircraft incidents." Nathan's jaw tightened. "So the crashes were deliberate?" "Yes," Reynolds said. "We believe your employee, David Benson, discovered the connection. His death was made to look accidental after he tried to report it." Amira's hand froze on her pencil. She looked at the men with wide eyes. "So my father was right." Reynolds softened his tone. "He was, and his daughter helped finish what he started." Nathan placed a hand on the table, steady but firm. "What happens next?" "We are issuing warrants today," Reynolds said. "But it may take weeks to bring everyone in. Some of them have already fled. We will need continued cooperation from your company to clean this up." "You will have it," Nathan said, "completely." After they left, the house grew quiet again. Nathan sat for a moment, absorbing the weight of what he had just heard. Amira looked at him carefully. "Does this mean it is over?" she asked. "Not yet," he said, "but we are close." She nodded slowly. "Then we cannot stop now." Nathan smiled faintly. "You sound like your father again." That afternoon, he received a call from his assistant at headquarters. The news was spreading fast. Reporters were gathering outside the company's main office. Stockholders were demanding answers. Nathan was expected to make a public statement. He looked at the child sitting quietly by the window and knew what he had to do. By noon, he was standing in front of the press at the corporate headquarters downtown. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded the podium. The glass facade of the building reflected a crowd of journalists and employees, all waiting. Nathan adjusted the microphone. His voice, when he began, was steady but heavy with truth. Yesterday morning, a tragedy was prevented by a child's courage. Because of her warning, lives were saved, and a long-hidden crime inside this company was uncovered. He paused, letting the murmurs settle. "I will not make excuses. This corporation failed to protect its workers and the public. I failed to see what was happening under my own name. But that ends today." He announced a full audit of the aviation division, the suspension of all private flights, and the creation of a new foundation named the Benson Initiative to honor David Benson and his daughter Amira for their integrity and bravery. The reporters scribbled furiously. Someone asked, "Who is the child, Mr. Cole?" Nathan answered without hesitation. "Her name is Amira Benson. She is proof that truth can come from the smallest voice, and that courage has nothing to do with power or age." That single line echoed across the press hall. When the conference ended, the story spread within hours. Television headlines read, "Little girl saves dozens from jet disaster." Social media called her the girl who grounded the sky. Later that evening, back at the lodge, Nathan returned to find Amira sitting on the porch steps, watching the wind move through the trees. She turned as he approached. "Did you tell them?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I told them everything." She smiled. "Then my father can rest." Nathan sat beside her, the last light of day stretching across the lawn. "You know, Amira," he said quietly, "people will remember what you did today for a long time." She shook her head. "They should remember my father. He was the one who tried first." "They will," Nathan promised, "and I will make sure of it." The air was still and gentle. Fireflies began to flicker in the shadows near the trees. Amira watched them with wide eyes, her expression soft. "They look like little pieces of light trying not to go out," she said. Nathan nodded. Sometimes that is what truth feels like. Small, but strong enough to see the way. As the evening deepened, the two of them sat together in silence. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a quiet reminder that storms always return. But so does the morning. For now, there was peace. And the faint sound of wind moving through the trees carried a whisper of promise that the worst was behind them, and something better was beginning to take shape. The following morning began quietly, with the sound of rain against the wide glass windows of the lodge. The storm that had been rumbling the night before had finally arrived. Gray clouds rolled over the trees, and thunder echoed softly in the distance. Inside, the house felt warm and safe, the fire in the hearth burning low but steady. Amira sat at the kitchen table, her chin resting on her hand, watching droplets race each other down the window. Her Aunt Lorraine stood nearby, stirring oatmeal on the stove. Nathan Cole entered the room with his jacket still damp from checking the front gate. He placed a folder of documents on the counter and tried to smile. "The news is everywhere," he said. "Every channel, every headline. People are talking about you, Amira." She looked up, surprised. "About me?" Nathan nodded. "About what you did. They are calling you the girl who stopped the sky from falling." Amira's eyes widened. "That sounds too big." "Sometimes the truth is big," Nathan said. "You gave it a voice." Lorraine placed a bowl in front of the girl. "She just did what her heart told her to do," she said softly. "That is what her father taught her." Nathan's expression softened. He taught her well. After breakfast, Lorraine excused herself to make a phone call to Amira's mother. Nathan gathered the folder he had brought in and sat across from the girl. "There is something I want to show you," he said. He opened the folder and slid a printed document across the table. It was a certificate with an official seal at the top. "This is the formation record of the Benson Initiative," he explained. "It will be a program that helps workers in aviation speak up when they see something wrong. No one should ever have to risk their life to tell the truth again." Amira traced her finger over the words, reading them carefully. "You used my father's name." "Yes," Nathan said, "because he was brave enough to try, and because you finished what he started." She looked up at him with a small smile. "He would like that." I think so too." For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the rain. Then Amira asked, "Are you still in trouble?" Nathan chuckled quietly. "A little. But I will face it. I am going to testify before the federal board next week. I will tell them exactly what happened, and I will give them every name involved." "Even the man who worked with her?" she asked. "Especially him," Nathan replied. "Victor Hale will not hide behind my company's name any longer." Amira nodded slowly. "He was the one in the video with her, right?" "Yes," Nathan said. "He is the one." Amira hesitated before speaking again. "Then you have to be careful." Nathan tilted his head. "Why do you say that?" She lowered her voice. "Because bad people do not like when the truth comes out. My father said sometimes they try to make it go away again." Nathan felt a chill, not from the cold but from the truth in her words. He placed a hand over hers gently. "You are right. That is why I will make sure you and your family stay protected." Outside, the rain fell harder, tapping against the roof in rhythmic bursts. The fire crackled softly. It felt like the world was pausing, holding its breath before the next turn. By late afternoon, Lorraine had finished her call and returned to the room. "Amira's mother is feeling better," she said with relief. "The doctor said her condition is stable now." Amira smiled for the first time in hours. "Can I see her soon?" "Of course," Nathan said. "Once the investigation calms down a little, I will arrange transportation, safely." The rest of the day passed quietly. Lorraine napped upstairs while Nathan and Amira played a board game by the fireplace. Each move brought a little laughter, the kind that had been missing from both their lives for too long. When evening came, Nathan stepped outside to take a call from his assistant. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. Puddles glimmered on the stone path, reflecting the golden light from the windows. "Yes," Nathan said into the phone. "I will be in the city tomorrow. Make sure the reports are sent directly to the federal office. No delays." He ended the call and turned back toward the house. But as he reached for the door, something caught his attention. Across the driveway, near the trees, a dark car sat parked, half hidden by the shadows. Its headlights were off, but he could see the faint silhouette of someone inside. His pulse quickened. The security gate should have been locked. Nathan stepped closer, careful not to make noise. But before he could approach, the car engine started, low and smooth. The vehicle backed away, turned onto the road, and disappeared into the mist. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where the car had been. The unease in his chest deepened. When he returned inside, Amira noticed the change in his expression. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Nothing for you to worry about," Nathan said gently. "I just thought I saw something outside." She studied him carefully, her young eyes far more perceptive than he expected. "Do you think it was them?" Nathan hesitated, then shook his head. "It could have been anyone. But I will make sure the guards check the perimeter." Amira nodded, though the tension did not leave her face. She walked to the window and looked out into the fog. "The world gets quiet before something happens," she said softly. "My father used to say that too." Nathan looked at her, understanding that her instincts were not to be ignored. He picked up his phone and called the security company, instructing them to send additional patrol units for the night. As he hung up, he glanced once more toward the rain-washed glass. The reflection of the fire shimmered beside Amira's face, her eyes distant but steady. Nathan realized something in that moment. He had promised to protect her, but she was also protecting him, not through force or strength, but through the clarity of truth that she carried like a light in dark weather. Outside, the night deepened, and the sound of distant thunder rolled again. Somewhere beyond the trees, someone else was moving, watching, waiting. Inside, under the quiet flicker of firelight, two lives bound by courage and loss prepared themselves, unknowingly, for the storm that was about to return. The next day began with a thin veil of fog covering the property. The air smelled of rain and pine, still heavy from the storm. Nathan Cole had barely slept. The image of the dark car from the night before stayed in his mind, circling like a warning that refused to fade. He had not told Lorraine the full truth, only that extra guards were now patrolling the road. Still, the tension had settled in the air, quiet but unmistakable. Amira was the first to wake. She stepped softly into the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Nathan was already there, standing by the counter with a cup of coffee in his hand. The steam rose and drifted in the still air. "Good morning," she said, her voice small but steady. "Good morning, Amira," he replied with a tired smile. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "I dreamed of my father again. He was fixing something. This time it was not a plane, it was a door." "A door?" Nathan asked. "Yes," she said, sitting down at the table. "He said some doors are locked to keep people safe, not to keep them out." Nathan thought about that for a moment. "Your father had a way of making everything sound simple and true." Amira smiled faintly. "He did." Ugh. Before they could say more, Nathan's phone buzzed on the counter. He answered immediately. It was Agent Reynolds from the Federal Bureau. "Mr. Cole," the agent said, "I need to inform you that Victor Hale has disappeared. His phone was found abandoned near the state border. We believe he may be trying to leave the country." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Do you have any indication that he might come after us?" There was a pause before Reynolds answered. "We do not have direct evidence, but his associates know the investigation began with the video your witness provided. It would be wise to remain cautious." "Understood," Nathan said. "We will stay alert." He ended the call and turned toward Amira. She was watching him carefully, her eyes wide. "It is about him, is it not?" Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, the man from the video. He is running from the law." Her small hands clenched on the table. "Then he is scared of the truth." Nathan managed a thin smile. "Yes, Amira, he is." Lorraine came downstairs a few minutes later, already sensing the unease in the room. Nathan reassured her that they would remain safe, but he called for additional security once more. He would not take any chances. By late morning, 2 agents arrived at the lodge to monitor the property. The sight of their dark suits and earpieces made the peaceful house feel like a checkpoint. Amira watched them quietly from the living room window. "They look serious," she said. "They are here to make sure no one gets hurt," Nathan replied. "That is all." He tried to sound confident, but his thoughts were far away. The investigation was deepening. Every file, every record, every report from the last year had to be reviewed. He knew the company he had built was now under a microscope, and he was ready for that. What he was not ready for was the idea that the people responsible were still out there. Around noon, an envelope arrived by courier. It was unmarked, addressed simply to Nathan Cole. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a single piece of paper and a photograph. The paper read, "Some truths cost more than they are worth." The photograph showed a grainy image of the lodge taken from outside the gate during the night. Nathan felt the chill rise from his stomach to his throat. He folded the letter and slid it into his pocket before Amira or Lorraine could see. Later that afternoon, when the rain began again, Nathan joined Amira in the library. She was seated on the floor beside the bookshelf, reading a book about constellations. The soft light from the window made her braids shimmer like threads of ink. "Do you believe people can change?" she asked without looking up. Nathan sat down beside her. "I do. Sometimes it takes something terrible to remind them of who they were supposed to be. Then maybe that is why this happened," she said. "So you could remember." Her words struck him gently but deeply. "You may be right," he said. They spent the next hour talking quietly. Amira told him more about her father, how he used to fix old radios, how he would whistle while he worked, how he said that truth, like music, always finds its way through the noise. Nathan listened carefully, realizing that every story she told was like a missing piece of the man he had once overlooked. Evening came sooner than expected. The fog thickened again, turning the trees outside into shadows. Lorraine was preparing dinner when the power flickered once, then steadied. One of the agents outside checked the generator and radioed back that everything was fine. Amira sat near the window, watching the fog curl across the glass. "It feels like the world is holding its breath again," she said softly. Nathan walked over and stood behind her. "Sometimes calm comes before something changes, not always before danger." "And," she nodded but kept her eyes on the glass. "He is still out there, is he not?" Nathan did not answer immediately. "Yes," he said finally. "But people like him run because they cannot face the truth. People like your father, and people like you, stand because they can." Amira turned to him, her expression steady. "Then we will stand." Nathan felt a quiet pride in that moment. For all the darkness surrounding them, the light in her voice was stronger. As night fell, the wind picked up again. The sound of branches brushing against the windows filled the quiet house. Lorraine lit another fire, and Amira fell asleep on the couch with her book still open beside her. Nathan stayed awake, sitting near the window. He could see faint lights moving near the edge of the property, just the guards, he hoped. He whispered into the still air, more to himself than anyone else. "We will finish this, David, I promise." Outside, the fog swirled and shifted, as if the world had heard him. The truth was close now, close enough to expose, but not without a price. And as the fire burned low, the man who had built an empire realized that his redemption was no longer in saving his company, but in keeping a promise to a mechanic and his brave daughter who refused to let the truth be buried. The wind that night was sharper than before, carrying the cold through the trees that surrounded the lodge. The fog had lifted slightly, but the air remained heavy with the kind of silence that precedes something important. Nathan Cole had been awake for hours, moving quietly through the house, checking every door and window twice. The photograph from the anonymous letter sat folded in his pocket, a constant reminder that whoever had taken it was still close. Outside, the guards patrolled the perimeter, their flashlights sweeping across the wet ground. The light flickered against the trees, then vanished again into the dark. From the upstairs hallway, Nathan could hear Lorraine's soft footsteps as she made sure Amira was asleep. He waited until she returned to her room before stepping into his study and locking the door behind him. He opened his laptop, the screen's glow cutting through the darkness. Dozens of unread emails waited for him, some from the federal agents, others from frightened executives. But one message stood out. The sender's address was hidden, but the subject line read, "You cannot protect them forever." Nathan opened it. Inside was a single sentence, "The girl is not safe where she is." His hands tightened around the edge of the table. He immediately copied the message and forwarded it to Agent Reynolds, adding a note that said, "Trace this now." Then he shut the laptop and took a deep breath. When he stepped out of the study, Amira was standing at the end of the hallway, still in her pajamas, clutching her small stuffed bear. Her eyes looked sleepy but calm. "You are still awake," she said. "I could say the same about you," Nathan replied gently. "Could not sleep?" She shook her head. "The wind sounds like whispers." He smiled faintly. "That is just the storm moving through the trees." But she did not seem convinced. "It feels like someone is out there," she said quietly. "Like when my father used to come home late, and I could hear his truck before I could see it." Nathan hesitated. Her instincts had been right before. "Do you want to check together?" he asked. She nodded, and the two of them walked to the front of the house. The porch light glowed weakly against the fog. Nathan opened the door just enough to look outside. The guards' flashlights moved in the distance, tracing slow, steady paths along the fence line. Nothing seemed wrong. Still, he could not shake the unease. He turned to Amira. "Let us go back inside. It is cold." They returned to the living room, where the fire had burned down to red embers. Amira sat on the couch, pulling the blanket over her knees. She looked at him with quiet seriousness. "Mr. Cole, why do people get scared of the truth?" Nathan sat across from her, his elbows resting on his knees. "Because the truth can destroy what they built. Some people think lies keep them safe, but they only make the fall worse when the truth finally comes." She nodded slowly. "That is what my father said too." Her words always carried a kind of still wisdom that humbled him. He could not help but wonder how much pain had carved that wisdom into her at such a young age. The phone on the side table rang, breaking the silence. Nathan answered quickly. It was Agent Reynolds. "Mr. Cole, we traced that email," the agent said. "It came from a device near your location, within 5 miles. Nathan's pulse quickened. "You are certain?" "Yes. Keep everyone inside. We are sending a team." "I understand." He hung up and turned toward Amira, who was watching him carefully. "It is going to be all right," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Go upstairs with your aunt. I need to make a few calls." But Amira did not move. "You are not telling me everything," she said. He sighed. "Someone sent a message. I think it was the same person who took that photograph. Then they know where we are." "Yes," he admitted. "But help is coming." She stood and walked closer, looking up at him with steady eyes. "If my father were here, he would say to face it, not hide from it." Nathan knelt so that his eyes were level with hers. "I am not hiding, Amira. I am protecting you." A sound outside cut him off, a sharp crack, like a branch breaking. The guards shouted something in the distance. Nathan stood quickly and moved to the window. 2 beams of light were moving fast toward the east fence. Another voice called out, then silence. Lorraine appeared at the top of the stairs, alarmed by the noise. "What is happening?" "Stay with Amira," Nathan ordered. He opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The air smelled like wet leaves and fuel. A guard ran up the path toward him, breathing hard. "Someone cut the back line, sir. We saw movement near the maintenance shed." Nathan's mind raced. "Did you see who it was?" "No, sir, but they were quick. They dropped this." The guard handed him a flashlight and a small metal object. It was a fuel additive capsule, the same kind used in the sabotage investigation. Nathan's breath caught. It was not just intimidation anymore. It was a threat. He looked back toward the house. Through the window, he could see Amira standing near the fire, her small figure framed in the warm light. She was holding her bear tightly, watching him. Nathan turned to the guard. "Lock down the perimeter. No one leaves, no one enters. Call Agent Reynolds and tell him to get here fast." The guard nodded and ran back into the fog. Nathan stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. He tried to smile for Amira's sake. "Everything is under control," he said softly. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the same unease he felt. "It is starting again, is it not?" He crouched beside her. "Not this time," he said. "This time we are ready." Outside, the sound of engines grew faint in the distance, vehicles approaching through the fog. Nathan hoped they were the agents, not the ones who wanted the truth buried forever. Inside the house, the fire flared brighter for a moment, as if the air itself understood that the night was about to change. And as Nathan placed a protective hand on Amira's shoulder, he made a silent promise that no one, no matter how powerful, would ever silence the truth that this brave child had carried into the world. The fog over the property had not lifted by sunrise. It clung to the trees like smoke, wrapping the lodge in a cold stillness that felt unnatural. Nathan Cole had not slept. Every sound outside had kept him alert: the crackle of branches, the faint hum of distant engines, the low murmur of the guards' radios. The message from the night before, warning that the girl is not safe, repeated in his thoughts like a drumbeat. By 6 o'clock, federal agents had arrived. Their black vehicles lined the gravel road like silent sentinels. Agent Reynolds was the first to step out. His eyes swept the fog before he spoke. "We will move her to a secure location today. This place is compromised." Nathan nodded, his expression stern. "I agree. But I do not want her frightened. She has already been through enough." Reynolds looked at him with quiet understanding. "She will be safe, Mr. Cole. You have my word." Inside, Amira sat at the dining table, her small hands wrapped around a cup of cocoa. Lorraine hovered near her, packing a small bag. The girl's eyes were steady, though she clearly sensed the tension around her. "Are we leaving?" she asked. Nathan crouched down to meet her gaze. "Yes, just for a little while. The agents will take you and your aunt to a safer place." Her brows furrowed slightly. "Are you coming with us?" He hesitated. "Not right away. I have to finish something first." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are going after him, are you not?" Nathan could not lie to her. "Yes, but I will not be alone. I have people helping me." Amira nodded slowly. "My father used to say you cannot fix a broken engine if you keep pretending it is fine." Nathan smiled faintly. He was right. That is exactly what I am doing now, fixing what I should have fixed before. By the time the agents finished loading the vehicles, the fog had thickened again, dulling the sound of everything. Nathan walked Amira and Lorraine to the car. She looked out at the trees, then back at him. "You will be careful, right?" "I promise," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I will see you soon." She handed him her small stuffed bear. "For luck," she said simply. He accepted it, his throat tightening. "I will take good care of it." As the car drove away, its red taillights disappeared quickly into the mist. Nathan stood there long after it was gone, the bear clutched in his hand, the silence of the property pressed against him. Then he turned back toward the house. Agent Reynolds was waiting at the door. "We have traced a lead. Victor Hale's car was spotted 2 counties over. He may be trying to reach the coast." Nathan's jaw set. "Then that is where I am going." Reynolds shook his head. "Let us handle this. You have already done enough." "I am not stepping back," Nathan said firmly. "He hurt people under my watch. I need to face him myself." The agent studied him for a moment, then sighed. "All right, but you go nowhere without our escort." Within an hour, they were on the road. The drive was long and quiet, the highway lined with trees still wet from rain. Nathan stared out the window, his thoughts drifting to the little girl who had upended his world. Every time he blinked, he saw her standing on that runway, her voice echoing through the chaos. "Stop. Do not take off." It reminded him that courage often comes from those who have the least to lose but the most to protect. 2 hours later, they reached a small coastal town where fishing boats rocked gently in the gray water. The air smelled of salt and diesel. Agent Reynolds pointed toward a row of storage hangars near the dock. "That is where his vehicle was found. We believe he may have used it to transfer money or documents before escaping." They approached cautiously. The hangar doors were half open. Inside, the space was dark except for a single light flickering overhead. Papers littered the ground: maintenance reports, fuel manifests, invoices with forged signatures. Nathan picked up one sheet. "These are company documents." He took them from headquarters. Reynolds examined another file. "Evidence of payments to offshore accounts. This is enough to prove the entire scheme." But before they could continue, a noise echoed from deeper inside the hangar, a soft metallic clang, followed by footsteps. The agents drew their weapons and advanced carefully. Nathan stayed behind, heart pounding. From the shadows emerged a man in a dark coat, his face unshaven and eyes hollow. It was Victor Hale. His voice carried a mix of bitterness and exhaustion. "You should have stayed quiet, Nathan. You had everything. Why come chasing ghosts?" Nathan stepped forward, his tone calm but sharp. "Because those ghosts were people. David Benson was one of them. You took his life. You almost took his daughter's too." Victor's smile twisted. "She was never supposed to be part of it. None of this was." Reynolds moved closer, his voice firm. "Put your hands where I can see them, Mr. Hale." Victor hesitated, glancing toward a small crate near the wall. Nathan followed his gaze and froze. A fuel additive capsule, the same kind found at the airfield, sat open beside a canister. Reynolds noticed too. "Step away from that now." Victor's expression hardened. "You think justice means anything to people like us? The system will bury this like it buries everything else." "No," Nathan said quietly. "Not this time." The moment stretched thin. Then Victor lowered his gaze and whispered, "You should have let it burn." Before he could move, Reynolds lunged forward, knocking him to the ground. The other agents swarmed in, securing him. Nathan stood still, the weight of it all sinking in. When it was over, Reynolds turned to him. "It is done. He is in custody." Nathan nodded slowly. "No, it is just beginning." Outside, the clouds began to break apart, letting thin light spill across the dock. Nathan looked toward the horizon. The world felt quieter, but not yet peaceful. He reached into his coat pocket and touched the small stuffed bear Amira had given him. For the first time since the chaos began, he allowed himself to breathe deeply. Somewhere far away, a child was safe because she had chosen to speak the truth, and that truth had finally reached the shore. The ocean mist rolled over the docks as the morning deepened. The gray sky began to clear slowly, turning the water a muted silver. Federal agents surrounded the hangar, securing every entrance while collecting boxes of evidence. Victor Hale sat handcuffed near the patrol car, his once composed face now pale and hollow. He did not look at Nathan Cole as the agents led him away. Nathan stood near the entrance, his coat still damp from the sea breeze. The small stuffed bear Amira had given him rested in his pocket, its soft fabric worn from his grip. He looked out toward the horizon, feeling both relief and exhaustion in the same breath. The danger had been stopped, but the shadow of what had happened still lingered. Agent Reynolds approached from behind. "He will face trial," he said. "The evidence you provided makes the case airtight. There is no way out for him now." Nathan nodded. "That is justice for David Benson, and for every worker who was silenced." Reynolds glanced at him. "You did the right thing, Mr. Cole, but this will not be easy. The investigation will dig deep into your company. Are you ready for that?" "Yes," Nathan said quietly. "I am ready. The truth deserves to be known, no matter what it costs." As the agents packed up, Nathan's phone vibrated. The screen lit up with a message from Lorraine. "We are safe. Amira is asking if you are all right." He stared at the words for a long moment before replying. "Tell her everything is fine. Tell her she was right. Truth really does find the light." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked toward the pier. The water lapped against the wooden posts, rhythmic and calm. It was the first calm he had felt in weeks. By the time he returned to the city later that day, the story had already reached every major network. The headlines spoke of corruption, betrayal, and one young girl's courage that had stopped a tragedy. Reporters waited outside the corporate headquarters, but Nathan did not speak to them. He went straight to his office, where the walls that once symbolized power now felt like reminders of ignorance. Stacks of papers, framed awards, and photos of company achievements lined the room. He removed one frame from the shelf, a picture of the day his first aircraft rolled off the production line. It had been a moment of pride then. Now, it carried a different weight. He placed it face down on the desk. He spent the afternoon signing documents that officially transferred authority of the company's aviation division to an independent oversight board. He made sure that safety procedures, whistleblower protections, and employee welfare policies were written into the new bylaws. There would be no more cover-ups, no more silence. When the final signature dried, Nathan closed the file and leaned back in his chair. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside the office there was stillness. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Amira's bear, setting it beside his laptop. Its small button eye reflected the sunlight from the window. He remembered her standing on the runway, voice trembling but unshaken, shouting for the truth. That image had become his compass. As evening fell, he left the office and drove toward the hospital where Amira's mother was recovering. Lorraine met him in the waiting room, relief softening her face when she saw him. "She will be glad to see you," Lorraine said. "Amira has been waiting all day." Nathan nodded and stepped quietly into the hospital room. Amira sat in a chair beside her mother's bed, drawing in her sketchbook. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with a quiet smile. "You kept your promise," she said. He smiled back. "Yes, I did. He has been caught. It is over now." Her mother stirred and opened her eyes. "You must be Mr. Cole," she said weakly. "Amira told me everything. Thank you for believing her." "It is I who should thank her," Nathan replied. "Your daughter saved more lives than she can imagine." Amira's mother smiled faintly. "Her father would be proud." Nathan nodded, his voice soft. "He will not be forgotten. His name will stand for courage, not tragedy." Amira looked up from her sketchbook. "Are you going back to work now?" "Yes," Nathan said. "But my work will be different. It will be about helping people like your father, not ignoring them." She closed her book and handed him a page she had torn out. On it, she had drawn a plane soaring into the sky, the sun behind it forming a golden circle. Underneath, she had written in neat letters, "Truth flies higher." Nathan took the drawing carefully, as if it were something sacred. "This will go in my office," he said. "Right where everyone can see it." Amira smiled. "Then they will remember too." He nodded. "Yes, they will." A quiet peace settled in the room. The monitors beeped softly. The rain outside the window had stopped, leaving the world washed and new. As Nathan prepared to leave, Amira reached for the bear that had been sitting in his pocket. "You can keep him," she said. "He likes staying with people who tell the truth." Nathan laughed softly. "Then I will make sure he stays proud of me." He shook her small hand and turned toward the door. When he looked back, Amira was waving. Her mother smiled, tired but content. Outside, the evening sky glowed with streaks of gold and blue. Nathan stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, the drawing in his hand, the bear tucked safely under his arm. The world felt lighter. He realized then that redemption was not about fixing the past, but about carrying its lessons forward. And sometimes, it takes a child's voice to remind the world how to listen. The truth had found its way through fear, through lies, through loss, and now it was finally free to fly. The following morning brought a calm that felt almost foreign. The city, usually alive with noise, seemed quieter, as if it too was taking a breath after weeks of tension. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind clear skies washed in pale blue. Nathan Cole sat by the window of his office, sunlight falling across his desk, touching the edge of the drawing Amira had given him. "Truth flies higher." It had become more than a symbol. It was a promise. The corporate tower, once filled with fear and whispers, was different now. People moved through the halls with cautious optimism. The corruption that had lived in the shadows of his company was gone, but its memory lingered like smoke after a fire. Nathan knew rebuilding trust would take time. Yet, for the first time, he felt ready to do it the right way. He opened his laptop and began reviewing the new safety protocols for the Benson initiative. The program had already drawn support from aviation engineers, mechanics, and pilots across the country. Anonymous reporting lines were being established. Scholarships for workers' families were in progress, and a memorial fund in David Benson's name was approved by the board. A knock sounded at the door. His assistant stepped in, carrying a folder. "Mr. Cole, the first independent safety audit is ready for your review. Also, the news networks are requesting an interview. They want to talk about the foundation." Nathan shook his head gently. "Not yet. Let the story speak for itself. It is not about me." The assistant nodded and left. For a moment, Nathan simply sat back and watched the morning light shimmer across the skyline. He had spent years chasing profit and control, believing success was measured in numbers. Now he understood that integrity had always been the real measure. By noon, he was standing before a group of employees in the main assembly hall. Hundreds of faces looked back at him: mechanics, engineers, administrators, pilots. The air was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation. Nathan spoke with the same steady conviction he had found since meeting Amira. "What happened here will not define us by shame, but by how we choose to rise from it. One small voice stopped us from making a terrible mistake. That voice belonged to a child who refused to stay silent, even when the world doubted her. Let her courage be our standard." Applause filled the hall, long and sincere. For many of them, it was the first moment of hope since the scandal began. When the meeting ended, Nathan returned to his office, where the phone rang almost immediately. He answered and heard Lorraine's familiar voice. "Mr. Cole, it is Lorraine. Amira wanted to tell you something herself." A second later, a small voice came through the receiver. "Mr. Cole?" Has smiled. "Hello, Amira. I saw you on the news," she said, her tone cheerful. "They said you are fixing everything." I am trying," he said. "But I had help from a very brave girl." She giggled softly. "That is what Aunt Lorraine said too. She said bravery is like a seed, it grows when you take care of it." "That is a beautiful way to say it," Nathan replied. "And she is right. You planted the first seed." Amira grew quiet for a moment. "Mr. Cole, can I ask something?" "Of course. Do you still have the bear?" He glanced toward his desk, where the small stuffed bear sat beside her drawing. "Yes, he is right here, sitting next to me." "Then you are not alone," she said. "That means you can keep doing good things." Nathan felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, Amira. I promise I will not stop." When the call ended, he sat in silence for several minutes, letting her words settle in the room. He looked again at the bear and at the sunlight falling across it. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace, not the peace of comfort, but the peace that comes after facing truth without fear. Later that afternoon, Agent Reynolds stopped by his office to give an update. "The trial for Victor Hale will begin next month," he said. "The evidence is overwhelming. It should be straightforward." Nathan nodded. "And Captain Reyes? She has agreed to testify," Reynolds said. "She claims remorse, but she will serve time as well." "Good," Nathan said. "Let justice do its work." Reynolds studied him for a moment. "You look different, Nathan. Lighter." "I think I finally know what matters," Nathan replied. "And I have a little girl to thank for that." The agent smiled and left. As evening approached, Nathan closed his office for the day and walked to the memorial garden recently built beside the main hangar. The names of every fallen worker were engraved on a long marble wall. Among them was David Benson. Fresh flowers lay beneath it, placed there that morning. Nathan stood silently for a long time. He spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "You were right. Machines are honest, but people can be too if they are brave enough." The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the scent of oil and salt air from the nearby coast. It felt like an answer. When he returned to his car, he found a small envelope tucked under the windshield. Inside was a child's drawing, Amira's handwriting scrawled across the bottom. It showed a man and a girl standing beside a plane, smiling under a bright Sunday. Beneath them were the words, "We fixed the wings." Nathan laughed quietly, the sound breaking into the cool evening air. He folded the drawing carefully and placed it beside the bear on the passenger seat. As he drove away, the lights of the city reflected in the rearview mirror like stars. For the first time, they did not look distant or cold. They looked alive, like promises kept. And as the road opened before him, Nathan Cole finally understood that redemption was not an ending. It was a beginning built on truth, courage, and the voice of one small girl who refused to let the world forget what integrity sounded like. A week later, the city was alive with the sound of movement and renewal. The morning light poured across the skyline, illuminating a new chapter for both the company and the people who had built it. Nathan Cole walked through the wide marble lobby of his headquarters, greeting employees as he passed. The building, once tense and filled with fear, now carried an energy of quiet hope. Every day since the scandal had broken, Nathan had worked to rebuild not just the company's name, but its conscience. The Benson Initiative had officially launched, its offices occupying an entire floor of the tower. On one wall hung a portrait of David Benson beside a plaque that read, "Courage begins when silence ends." Beneath it, employees stopped often to read, to reflect, and to remember. That morning, Nathan was preparing for an important board meeting. The federal inquiry had cleared him of wrongdoing, but his focus was not on relief. It was on accountability. He reviewed the agenda one last time before stepping into the conference room. The board members sat waiting, their expressions mixed, some uncertain, others supportive. Nathan placed his hands on the table and began to speak. His tone was calm but firm. "We cannot change the past, but we can decide what kind of future this company stands for. From this day forward, transparency will not be optional, it will be our foundation. I will not lead through power. I will lead through truth." There was silence for a moment, followed by slow, steady applause. Even the most skeptical faces softened. For the first time in a long while, Nathan saw trust returning not because of authority, but because of sincerity. When the meeting ended, he returned to his office to find an envelope on his desk. It was marked with the seal of the federal court. Inside was a notice. The People versus Victor Hale trial date confirmed. The hearing was set for the following week. Nathan sat back in his chair, letting the weight of it sink in. The man who had destroyed lives would finally stand before the law. Justice was no longer a distant idea. It was happening. Later that afternoon, he visited the memorial garden again. Fresh flowers had been placed at David Benson's name, and beside them was a small folded note. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Amira's. He unfolded it carefully. The note read, "Mr. Cole, I told my mom we should visit my dad's place. She smiled again today. I think she is getting better. Thank you for keeping your promise. I am drawing a new picture for you soon." Nathan smiled as he tucked the note into his coat pocket. The girl's words, simple and unadorned, carried more meaning than any corporate speech ever could. She had reminded him that healing was not only about justice, it was about kindness that outlasted pain. That evening, Nathan drove across town to the small apartment where Lorraine and Amira now lived. He had not seen them in person since the hospital visit, and he wanted to deliver something himself. When Amira opened the door, her face lit up. "Mr. Cole," she exclaimed, "you came back." "I did," he said, smiling. "And I brought something." He handed her a small box wrapped in brown paper. Amira tore it open carefully, revealing a polished wooden frame. Inside was a certificate with her name engraved in gold letters. Amira Benson, honorary founder of the Benson Initiative. Her eyes widened. "That means I work there?" "It means the program would not exist without you," Nathan said. "Your name will always be part of it." She stared at the certificate for a long moment, then whispered, "My dad would be proud." "He already is," Nathan said softly. Lorraine came into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. Cole, this is too much." "No," Nathan said. "It is exactly what she deserves." They sat together for a while, sharing tea and quiet conversation. Amira told him about school, about her mother's recovery, and about how she was learning to draw clouds that looked more real. Nathan listened, smiling at every word. The warmth of that small apartment felt more honest than any boardroom he had ever stood in. As the evening light dimmed, Nathan stood to leave. Amira followed him to the door, still holding the framed certificate against her chest. "Will you come to see my new drawing when it is done?" she asked. "I would not miss it for the world," he said. When he stepped outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. He looked back at the apartment window and saw Amira waving. Her silhouette was framed by the soft glow of a lamp, her small form a symbol of everything that had changed him. On the drive home, the city lights blurred against the windshield, gold and white, and alive. Nathan's thoughts turned to the upcoming trial. It would be difficult, but he was not afraid. The truth had already won. When he reached his house, he placed Amira's note beside her drawing on his desk. The two pieces of paper, one childlike, one written with quiet maturity, felt like bookends of a story that had transformed more than just a company. Nathan looked out the window toward the night sky. Planes passed overhead, their lights small and steady. He wondered if David Benson had ever imagined his daughter would one day be the reason a fleet could fly safely again. And in that still moment, Nathan understood something deeper. Redemption was not about clearing a name. It was about rebuilding a heart. The truth had cost them all something, but it had given back far more a chance to begin again, and to remember that courage could come from the smallest hands holding onto the biggest light. The morning of the trial arrived, with the weight of expectation hanging over the city. Clouds drifted low across the skyline, their edges touched with pale gold from the rising Sunday. The courthouse stood tall and gray against the light, its stone steps crowded with reporters and bystanders. The air was thick with anticipation and whispers. For many, this day symbolized more than justice for a single crime. It symbolized the moment when truth would finally speak louder than power. Nathan Cole stepped out of the car, dressed in a simple dark suit. He did not wear the expression of a businessman defending his name. Instead, he carried the quiet composure of a man who had accepted the truth and was ready to face it fully. As he entered the courthouse, flashes from cameras lit the morning air, but he did not look at them. His focus was on the courtroom ahead, and on the promise he had made to himself, to Amira, and to the memory of her father. Inside, the courtroom was silent except for the low shuffle of papers and the faint hum of the overhead lights. The benches were filled with journalists, company employees, and families who had been affected by the scandal. In the front row sat Lorraine and Amira. The girl wore a simple white dress and clutched the small stuffed bear that Nathan had once carried in his pocket. She looked both nervous and brave, her eyes fixed on the man she trusted to finish what her father had started. Victor Hale sat at the defense table, thinner than before, his face drawn and tired. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone cornered by his own deceit. He did not glance toward Nathan. His hands trembled slightly as the cuffs clicked when the bailiff motioned for silence. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The trial began. For hours, testimonies were read, and evidence was presented. The court listened to engineers, inspectors, and analysts. They spoke of falsified records, hidden payments, and maintenance reports that had been rewritten to hide mechanical failures. Each word built a chain linking every act of greed to every life put at risk. Nathan was called to the stand in the afternoon. He swore the oath and sat, the courtroom quiet enough to hear the faint scratch of pens against paper. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, can you explain your role in the discovery of this corruption?" Nathan nodded. "I did not uncover it on my own. A young girl named Amira Benson brought forward evidence her father had recorded before his death. She showed me the truth I had ignored for too long. Without her courage, none of us would be here today." He paused, glancing briefly toward Amira. Her small face looked up from the front row, her eyes shining with tears she did not wipe away. The prosecutor continued, "And what did you do once you received that evidence?" "I turned it over to the authorities immediately," Nathan said. "I also initiated a full internal investigation and suspended all operations related to the individuals responsible. My company failed in oversight, but I will not let it fail in integrity again." The defense attorney stood next. His tone was cautious. "Mr. Cole, do you take responsibility for the actions of your employees?" "Yes," Nathan said simply. "Leadership means responsibility. The failures of this company are mine to carry. But I will also carry the duty of making sure it never happens again." His voice carried through the courtroom like a steady wind, calm, resolute, and honest. There were no dramatic gestures, no rehearsed emotion, only truth. When Nathan stepped down from the stand, there was a moment of silence that felt sacred. Even the sound of papers stopped. By late afternoon, the prosecution called their final witness. It was Captain Reyes. She entered wearing her prison uniform, her face pale but composed. When asked to identify the man who had ordered her to falsify safety checks, she pointed directly at Victor Hale. Her voice shook but did not waver. "He told me to sign what was not true. He said if I did not, I would lose everything. I believed him, and it destroyed lives. I am sorry." The courtroom held its breath. Victor Hale said nothing. His lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. When the closing statements ended, the judge announced that the verdict would be delivered the next morning. The courtroom was dismissed, and people began to file out quietly. Outside, the air was cooler. Nathan stepped into the fading sunlight, the sounds of the city washing over him. Lorraine and Amira waited near the steps. The girl ran forward, her small shoes tapping against the stone. "You did it," she said, smiling. "You told the truth." He knelt to her level. "We both did, Amira. This was never just my fight." She looked up at him with the quiet certainty only a child could hold. "My father said truth has a voice. Maybe today, everyone finally heard it." Nathan smiled, a soft warmth spreading through his chest. "They did, and they will keep hearing it for a long time." Lorraine placed a hand on her niece's shoulder. "It is time to go home, sweetheart." Amira nodded but turned once more to Nathan. "Will you be there tomorrow when they say the final words?" "Yes," he said. "We will finish this together." As they walked away, Nathan watched them go, the small girl holding her aunt's hand, the bear tucked under her arm, her head tilted toward the sky. He stood there until they disappeared into the crowd, then looked toward the courthouse one last time. Tomorrow would bring a verdict, but for Nathan, The real judgment had already been made. It was not about guilt or innocence, it was about whether he had finally lived up to what truth demanded of him. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps, he whispered quietly to himself, "This is for you, David." She did it. She carried the light further than any of us ever could. The wind moved softly through the city, carrying his words like a promise that the truth, once spoken, would never be silenced again. The next morning dawned bright and cold, the kind of morning that carried both tension and clarity. The courthouse stood against a sky brushed with pale blue, the air crisp enough to see each breath. Reporters gathered early, cameras lined the steps, and murmurs filled the crowd. It was the day of the verdict in the case that had captured national attention. Nathan Cole arrived quietly, wearing the same dark suit as before. His eyes were tired but calm. He had spent most of the night awake, replaying every testimony, every truth that had come to light. This was not about his reputation anymore, it was about justice for David Benson, about giving peace to a child who had carried more courage than most adults ever would. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy with expectation. The judge entered, and the audience rose. Amira and her aunt sat once again in the front row, their presence grounding Nathan in silent strength. The girl's small hand rested over the stuffed bear on her lap, its fur now slightly worn from being held so often. The judge spoke with solemn precision. In the case of the People versus Victor Hale, the court has reached a verdict. The silence that followed was so deep that even the creak of a chair seemed too loud. The judge continued, reading from the document in her hands. On the charge of corporate conspiracy resulting in endangerment and involuntary manslaughter, the defendant is found guilty on all counts. A collective gasp swept the room, followed by quiet murmurs that rippled through the audience. Victor Hale's shoulders sagged as the bailiff stepped forward. He did not look at anyone. He simply lowered his head, the weight of his decisions finally pressing down like stone. The judge's voice cut through the whispers. The sentence will be determined in accordance with federal guidelines. This court acknowledges the bravery of those who came forward to uncover the truth, particularly the late David Benson and his daughter, whose actions prevented further loss of life. At those words, all eyes turned to Amira. She sat still, her chin lifted slightly, her expression solemn but proud. The courtroom seemed to breathe around her a collective recognition of the light she had brought into a place built for judgment. Nathan felt something tighten in his chest, not pain but release. It was as if a long, invisible chain had finally broken. After the verdict, the courtroom slowly emptied. Reporters waited outside, calling Nathan's name, but he waved them off. He had nothing more to say to cameras. The truth had already spoken for itself. Amira approached him as the last of the people filed out. "It is really over?" she asked softly. "Yes," Nathan said. "It is over." She looked thoughtful. "But my father is still gone." Nathan knelt to her level. "Yes, Amira, he is gone. But what he believed in, what he lived for, is still here. You made sure of that." The girl nodded, her eyes glistening but steady. "Then maybe he can rest now." "I think he already is," Nathan replied. Lorraine placed a gentle hand on her niece's shoulder. "Let us go home, sweetheart. You have done more than enough." Amira turned once more toward Nathan. "Will you come visit us again?" "I will," he said. "I still owe you a new story about airplanes, remember?" Her face brightened with a small smile. "You promised." "I do not break promises anymore," Nathan said, smiling back. Outside, the late morning light fell across the courthouse steps, bathing the stone in gold. The crowd was already dispersing. The noise of reporters faded as Nathan, Lorraine, and Amira stepped onto the sidewalk. The city seemed quieter now, not the silence of fear, but the calm that follows when truth finally takes its place. They stood together for a moment before parting ways. Lorraine and Amira headed toward their car, and Nathan watched as the girl turned to wave one last time. She raised the bear in her hand, the gesture simple but filled with meaning. Nathan watched until their car disappeared into the flow of traffic. Then he turned and began walking toward the memorial garden a few blocks away. The garden had become a small sanctuary for employees and families connected to the case. The marble wall gleamed in the sunlight, each name etched clearly, permanently. Nathan found David Benson's name near the center. Someone, perhaps Amira, had placed a single paper airplane, folded from white paper on the ledge beneath it. Written in careful handwriting across one wing were the words, "He fixed the sky." Nathan touched the paper plane gently. The simple gesture carried everything that needed to be said. He stood there for a long time, his eyes tracing the sunlight across the names. For the first time since the tragedy began, he did not feel guilt pressing against him. He felt gratitude. Gratitude for the courage of one man who refused to be silent. Gratitude for a little girl who ran across a runway to save strangers. Gratitude for the second chance to make things right. When he finally turned to leave, the wind picked up, carrying the paper airplane off the wall. It fluttered upward, catching a current of air, and for a moment it looked like it was truly flying. Nathan smiled as he watched it drift higher, rising above the rooftops until it disappeared into the morning light. Back in the distance, the city began to stir again, alive with the sound of people moving forward. Nathan walked toward the street, his steps steady, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He reached into his pocket and felt the small drawing Amira had given him, the one that said "Truth flies higher." He looked at it once more, then folded it carefully and placed it over his heart. The truth had flown higher indeed. It had soared beyond fear, beyond loss, beyond the lies that once weighed it down. And in that flight, it had carried with it the spirit of a little girl, her father, and a man who had finally learned that redemption does not come from perfection, it comes from choosing to face what is right, even when it hurts. Nathan Cole stepped into the sunlight, the city alive around him, and knew that for the first time in a long time, he was free. A few weeks passed after the trial, and the rhythm of life began to settle again. The city that had once buzzed with scandal now hummed with renewal. News headlines slowly shifted from corruption and crime to words like reform, recovery, and hope. For Nathan Cole, those weeks were not a return to normal. They were a beginning of something entirely new. He spent each morning at the headquarters of the Benson Initiative, the foundation named in honor of David Benson. The offices were filled with energy and purpose. Engineers, safety inspectors, and aviation workers came together to learn, to share, and to rebuild trust in an industry that had almost lost its soul. On one wall hung Amira's drawing, "Truth Flies Higher," framed and displayed where everyone could see it. Beneath it, in small engraved letters, were the words, "Inspired by courage that began with one voice." That morning, Nathan walked through the open-plan workspace, greeting staff with a quiet smile. He stopped beside the mural of blueprints on the wall, a design of aircraft engines intertwined with hands reaching upward. It was symbolic of how human integrity powered every machine. His assistant approached with a folder. "Mr. Cole, these are the scholarship applications for next month's awards. The first group of recipients will be announced soon." Nathan nodded. "Good. Make sure the families of maintenance workers get priority." This initiative started with one mechanic. It should honor every one of them. When the assistant left, Nathan paused for a moment, looking through the large windows at the city below. The sunlight touched the tops of buildings, turning the glass to gold. The world outside seemed alive again. He took a deep breath and allowed himself to feel proud not of power or success, but of restoration. Later that afternoon, he received a message from Lorraine. "Amira would like to see you. She has something to show you." Nathan smiled and replied immediately, "Tell her I am on my way." The drive to their home took less than 30 minutes, but in that time, memories unfolded in his mind. The first moment he had met Amira on the runway, her fearless shout, the phone she had held up like a weapon of truth. Those images had become a compass for his life, guiding every decision since. When he arrived, Amira ran to the door before Lorraine could even open it. Her hair was pulled back into two neat braids, and she wore a bright yellow sweater that seemed to carry the sunlight inside it. "You came," she said, beaming. "I promised I would," Nathan said, smiling warmly. "What is this surprise you have for me? Come in, you have to see it." She led him to the small living room, where a large sheet of paper covered the coffee table. On it was a detailed drawing, a scene of a new airplane painted in deep blue with white wings. Underneath, she had written, "The Benson Sky Project." Nathan looked down, astonished. "Did you make this?" Amira nodded proudly. "I did. I read about the foundation and wanted to draw a plane that belongs to everyone. Not just rich people, but workers, families, and kids. Planes that carry kindness, not secrets." Her words struck him like a melody of truth. Simple, innocent, but deeply wise. You have a gift, Amira, he said softly. You see what people forget to see. She tilted her head. I just see what is fair. My dad said when you fix something, you should make it better than before. Nathan knelt beside the table to look closer at her drawing. The details were remarkable, the engines, the markings, even the small figures waving from the ground. This is beautiful, he said. Do you know something, Amira? I think your project should become real. Her eyes widened. You mean really build it? Yes, Nathan said, his voice steady. Not exactly this plane, but what it represents, a program that connects young minds to aviation. We can teach kids how planes work, how safety matters, and how honesty keeps everything flying. Amira's hands clasped together. Like a school? Exactly, Nathan said. A school for truth in the sky. Lorraine, who had been standing quietly nearby, smiled with emotion. You really mean it? I do, Nathan said, and it will carry her father's name, the Benson Sky Program, a place where children can dream and learn, just like Amira. Amira's eyes sparkled. Can I help? You already have, Nathan said gently. You gave it its wings. They talked for a while, planning ideas on a notepad, how classrooms could be shaped like small hangars, how lessons could be about courage as much as science. Every word from Amira flowed with purpose and innocence, the kind that could heal even the most cynical heart. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft orange light, Nathan stood to leave. He turned to Lorraine and said, I will start the paperwork tomorrow. We will make this happen. Lorraine's voice trembled slightly. Mr. Cole, you have done so much already. You do not owe us anything. Nathan shook his head. This is not about debt. It is about gratitude. Your family reminded me of what truth really means. I will never forget that. Amira walked him to the door, holding her drawing carefully in her hands. Can I give you this one too? She asked. So you will not forget the design. He took the paper with reverence. I will keep it safe, he said. One day, when the program opens, we will hang it on the front door. As he stepped outside, the evening air carried the smell of rain mixed with blooming flowers. The city lights began to flicker on, and in the distance, the faint sound of an airplane hummed across the sky. Nathan looked up, watching it disappear into the clouds. For a long moment, he stood there, realizing that this was what healing looked like, not a headline, not applause, but the quiet continuation of good work inspired by one small act of courage. When he returned to his car, he unfolded Amira's new drawing and smiled. The plane she had drawn was soaring upward, above the clouds, carrying tiny hearts painted along its tail. He whispered to himself, truth flies higher, and kindness carries it the rest of the way. And with that, he drove into the fading light, knowing that both his life and the world around him were moving towards something better, something earned through honesty, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bravery of a little girl who had once stopped a plane and started a miracle. 2 months later, the first stage of the Benson Sky Program began to take shape. The airfield chosen for the project was small but surrounded by open skies and soft hills. It had once been a forgotten training facility, but now, with new paint and rebuilt hangars, it was becoming a place of hope. The sound of drills, laughter, and instruction blended together in the crisp morning air. Nathan Cole stood on the observation deck overlooking the field, his hands resting on the railing. He watched the workers install bright blue signs that read, "The Benson Sky Program, where truth takes flight." Each letter gleamed in the sunlight, standing as a promise to everyone who passed through those gates. Behind him, the door opened, and a familiar voice called out, "It looks amazing." Nathan turned to see Amira running toward him, her braids bouncing with every step. She wore a light denim jacket and sneakers that were slightly too big for her feet. Lorraine followed a few paces behind, smiling warmly. Nathan bent down slightly as Amira reached him. "What do you think?" he asked. She looked around, eyes wide. "It is bigger than I imagined. And the colors blue and white, just like the plane I drew." "You inspired the design," Nathan said with a smile. "Everyone wanted to keep it true to your vision." Amira stepped closer to the railing, gazing out over the field. "So this is where kids will come to learn?" "Yes," Nathan said. "They will learn how planes work, how to fix them, and most importantly, How to stay honest when things go wrong. Your father's story will be part of every class. Amira nodded softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He would have liked that. Lorraine placed a hand on her niece's shoulder. He would be proud, she said. Down below, construction workers and volunteers were busy setting up tents for the upcoming opening ceremony. Several of Nathan's employees from the foundation were coordinating logistics. They waved up at him when they noticed the visitors, and Amira waved back with both hands. Nathan looked around, taking in every sound, the wind brushing against the flags, the distant hum of machinery, the calls of gulls circling overhead. For the first time in years, an airfield under his care did not represent fear or risk. It represented new beginnings. A young technician approached and handed him a clipboard. "Mr. Cole, the flight simulator is ready for testing," he said. "Would you like to take a look?" Nathan smiled. "I think Amira should do that honor." Amira's eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes," Nathan said. "You have earned it." She glanced at Lorraine, who gave her a nod of encouragement. Together, they followed the technician into the main hangar. Inside, the space had been transformed into a training hub. A large glass enclosure stood in the center, housing a high-tech flight simulator modeled after a small private jet. Screens wrapped around its interior, displaying a panoramic view of open skies. Nathan gestured toward it. "Go ahead, Captain Benson." Amira giggled, climbing carefully into the simulator seat. The technician adjusted the settings, making sure the controls were light and responsive. "Ready for takeoff?" he asked playfully. "Ready," Amira said, gripping the yoke with both hands. The simulator screen flickered to life, showing a virtual runway stretching out beneath her. As she pulled back on the controls, the simulated aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky. The room filled with soft engine sounds and the rhythmic pulse of altitude sensors. Amira laughed with delight. "I am flying." Lorraine clasped her hands together, tears welling in her eyes. Nathan stood behind them, watching quietly. There was no fear in the girl's expression, only wonder and joy. After a few minutes, the technician guided her through a gentle landing. When the simulator came to a stop, Amira jumped out and ran to Nathan. "Did you see? I landed it perfectly." "I did," Nathan said, "and you handled it like a professional." She grinned proudly. "Maybe one day I can teach other kids how to fly too." Nathan knelt down so that his eyes met hers. "That is exactly what this place is for. It is for dreamers who want to build something better, and for truth-tellers who make the skies safer for everyone." Outside the hangar, the sun had risen higher, painting the field with gold. Workers were setting up a small stage for the ceremony that would happen in a few days. The mayor was expected to attend, along with reporters and families. But for Nathan, the only person he truly cared to see there was the little girl standing before him now. As they walked back toward the car, Amira stopped and looked over her shoulder one last time. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes, Amira? When this place opens, can I say something? Like a speech?" Nathan smiled warmly. "Of course you can. What would you like to say?" She thought for a moment. "I want to tell them that my father fixed engines, but he also fixed people. Because when you tell the truth, it fixes more than machines, it fixes hearts." Nathan felt his throat tighten. "That is beautiful," he said softly. "And it is true." Lorraine placed an arm around her niece. "She has always had his way with words." Nathan nodded, his voice low. "She has more than that. She has his courage." They reached the car, and before getting in, Amira looked up at the wide sky. "It looks different now," she said, "like it is not heavy anymore." Nathan followed her gaze. The sky was clear, endless, and free. "It is lighter because you lifted it," he said. As the car drove away, Nathan stayed behind for a few minutes longer, watching the wind ripple across the banners of the foundation. He thought of David Benson, of the man who had once stood alone in truth and paid dearly for it. Now, because of his daughter, that truth had wings. And as a new plane passed overhead, glinting in the sunlight, Nathan whispered under his breath, "The sky remembers." The hum of its engine faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that was not empty but full, a silence that carried the sound of promise, the kind that only comes after redemption. The day of the grand opening arrived beneath a flawless blue sky. White banners rippled gently in the wind, carrying the words "The Benson Sky Program, where truth takes flight." The airfield had been transformed into a place of light, color, and promise. Children ran along the fence lines holding paper airplanes, while families gathered near the stage. The scent of new paint, fresh grass, and sunlight filled the air. Nathan Cole stood near the podium, looking out over the growing crowd. Every face reflected hope and renewal. Behind him, the hangar doors were wide open, revealing the new training simulators and displays built for the program. Engineers and volunteers in blue jackets moved about with quiet purpose, helping guests and greeting families. He adjusted his tie slightly, but his attention drifted toward the small figure approaching from the parking area. Amira Benson, dressed in a simple white dress with blue ribbons, walked hand in hand with her Aunt Lorraine. The little girl's braids glimmered in the sunlight, and the small stuffed bear was tucked carefully under her arm. Nathan met them halfway, smiling warmly. "You made it," he said. Amira grinned. "I would not miss this for anything. You said I could give a speech." "And you will," Nathan said. "Everyone is waiting to hear from you." When it was time, the crowd quieted. Nathan took the stage first, his voice carrying steady and clear. This foundation began because one man believed that the truth should never be silenced. His courage was carried forward by his daughter, who reminded all of us that honesty can save lives. Today, this place stands not just as a school, but as a promise to always lead with integrity, to teach courage, and to honor the legacy of those who stood for what is right. He paused, then turned toward Amira. "And now, I would like to invite the person who gave this dream its wings, Miss Amira Benson." The crowd applauded as she stepped up to the microphone. She was small, but her voice carried with a quiet confidence that drew every eye. "My father fixed engines," she began. "He said every machine has a heart, and when it breaks, you have to listen carefully to understand why. I think people are like that too. When something goes wrong, the truth is what helps us fix it. That is what this place is for, to help people listen to what is right." She looked toward Nathan, then out at the crowd. "The sky is big, and sometimes it feels too high to reach. But my dad said if you build something with kindness and honesty, it will fly higher than anything else. That is what we are doing here today." When she finished, there was silence for a heartbeat, then a swell of applause that rose like wind through the open air. Lorraine wiped her eyes. Nathan looked at the girl with pride deeper than words. As Amira stepped down, he whispered to her, "You just gave the sky its voice." She smiled softly. "I just told the truth." And as the first training aircraft soared overhead, tracing a bright white line across the clear blue, the crowd watched in awe. It was not just a plane in the air, it was a promise fulfilled. The applause slowly faded, but the warmth of the moment stayed in the air like sunlight that refused to leave. The ceremony continued with music, laughter, and quiet conversation. Reporters took photos of Amira beside the blue and white sign of the Benson Sky Program, while volunteers handed out small paper airplanes stamped with the Foundation's logo. The sound of joy filled the airfield, blending with the gentle hum of engines from the nearby hangars. Nathan Cole stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the celebration unfold. For years, his name had been linked to power and control, but today it meant something far different. It stood for truth, renewal, and the courage of a child who had reminded him what integrity truly meant. He glanced over at Amira, who was now surrounded by other children her age, showing them how to fold perfect paper planes. Her laughter rang clear, honest, and full of life. Lorraine approached with 2 cups of lemonade. "You look like a man finally breathing again," she said. Nathan accepted a cup, smiling. "Maybe I am. This place feels different, lighter." "It is because of her," Lorraine said softly, glancing toward Amira. "She has that effect on people. She carries her father's strength, but her heart is all her own." Nathan nodded slowly. "She gave me back something I did not even realize I had lost." Lorraine tilted her head. "Faith?" "Exactly," he said. "Faith that the world can still be honest." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the runway, the ceremony drew to a close. Nathan stepped forward to make the final announcement. His voice was steady and filled with quiet conviction. "Every year, the Benson Sky Program will offer scholarships in honor of David Benson. But today, we are dedicating a special one, the Amira Benson Award for Young Voices, who stand for truth, no matter how small they are." The audience broke into applause again, and Amira froze for a moment before realizing her name had just been spoken. She turned toward Nathan, her eyes wide. "You named something after me?" she whispered when he came down from the stage. He smiled warmly. "You earned it. This is your legacy too." She grinned and threw her arms around him. "Then I will make sure they use it well." As the crowd began to disperse, the last of the planes in the simulator rose into the sky, gliding across the fading orange light. The field grew quiet again, but it was not empty. It was alive with the hum of possibility. Nathan stood beside Amira and Lorraine, watching the horizon turn gold. "You see that?" he asked, pointing at the aircraft disappearing into the clouds. Amira nodded. "It is flying higher." "Yes," Nathan said softly, "because truth always does." And as the wind lifted their hair and carried the sound of laughter through the airfield, the world around them seemed to whisper its agreement, a gentle promise that what began as one brave act would keep soaring long after the day had ended. As evening fell, the last of the guests left the airfield, and the sky turned from gold to deep indigo. The lights along the runway glowed softly, forming a line that stretched toward the horizon. The banners fluttered gently in the cooling breeze, their message, "Where truth takes flight," illuminated beneath the lamps. Nathan Cole stood alone on the observation deck, his jacket resting over one arm. Below him, the hangars were quiet now, but the energy of the day still lingered in the air. He could still hear echoes of laughter, applause, and the sound of Amira's small but steady voice telling the world that truth fixes hearts. It was the kind of voice that stayed with a person long after the noise faded. A moment later, soft footsteps approached from behind. Amira joined him, holding her stuffed bear in one hand. "Everyone went home," she said. "Aunt Lorraine is locking up." Nathan smiled down at her. "And you stayed to say goodbye to the sky?" She nodded. "I wanted to watch it one more time. It feels like it remembers us." They both looked out toward the darkening field. The first stars began to appear above them, quiet, small, but unshakably bright. Nathan spoke after a moment. "You know, Amira, people will come and go through this place. They will learn to build, to fly, and to fix what is broken. But the real lesson here is yours. You taught us that one truth, no matter how small, can save more lives than we will ever know." Amira turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "My dad said truth is like a light. It keeps shining even when people stop looking." Nathan smiled softly. "Then I think he is shining right now." She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Good night, Dad." The wind moved through the open hangars, carrying her words into the quiet sky. For a long time, they stood there together, watching the stars grow brighter. Finally, Nathan said, "It is getting late. Let us go home." "Oh." Amira took his hand, her small fingers curling around his. They walked back across the field, their shadows stretching long under the runway lights. Behind them, the airfield remained still, but alive with memory, with truth, with the unspoken promise that the sky would always remember the day a brave little girl stopped a plane and helped the world learn to fly right again.